This is People I Know Show, a podcast about interesting people, personal growth, and being wrong. I'm Curt Carstensen. This is another dual video audio episode, as many of you are watching this on YouTube or perhaps listening on one of the apps or through peopleiknowshow.com. Episode 42 is today, and it's with Steve Berke. Steve is someone I came across about 10 years ago, and his main influence on me is my thinking towards marijuana and the laws and legalization and decriminalization. And we get into all of that in this episode and several things related to it, plus this personal growth and his being wrong and how really it's more than marijuana that he thinks should be legalized, or maybe not legalized, but at least decriminalized. Check the show notes wherever you're listening or watching for links to get in contact and see more from Steve Berke and what he has been doing. And also be aware that because we recorded this through YouTube, there was some moments where the audio might not have been ideal, but I think everything was captured. This might be a little bit muffled, or there may have been some other noises at times. So please bear with me with that as I continue to learn from this process of doing video in addition to the audio. Now, let us get into the conversation with Steve Berke. Steve Berke joins me today on People I Know Show. Hello, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing well, Curt. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. This is episode 42 of my People I Know Show podcast, and officially, you were the first person that I say that I know that I'm having on that I've never actually met you in person. So this is the closest thing to that yet, but we have been in communication off and on for a very long time.
About 10 years, and I like it. I'm number 42, so 42.0 is a good number for me.
There you go. Just what a coincidence that was. And we'll get into that shortly. I guess the reason I want you on today is everyone I have on has influenced my thinking or actions in some way. And you mentioned 10 years ago that we first got in communication, and it was around that time that my thinking on marijuana and marijuana laws began to change. I never really gave it a ton of thought, but you had, and were becoming an activist in that area. And I guess I'd like you to just explain how all that came to be in your life. And now, years later, it's still it seems like as big a part of your life as anything, at least from an outside view looking in.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. It's an interesting journey. I remember you contacting me after I put out one of my very first, if not my very first YouTube video. And I don't even think it had 5,000 views. And you reached out and you said, "Hey man, I think your videos are great." And there was so you were kind of my first fan mail that I got, a comedy video. I started doing stand-up comedy about 10 years ago. And I was trying to find my comedic voice. I was doing all the local clubs in South Florida, where I'm from. And kind of a crazy story happened. I was in Europe with two of my buddies doing this European road trip. And a friend of mine from LA called me up while we were in Amsterdam, higher than we've ever been. And he called me up and he's like, "Hey, Tyson is in Berlin right now, and he's got nothing going on tonight. You want to go hang out with Tyson?" And when I say Tyson, he meant Tyson Ritter, the lead singer of All American Rejects. And I was friends with the band All American Rejects at the time, and friends with their manager. And so I asked my two buddies, I was like, "You guys want to go to Berlin tonight?" They're like, "Yeah, let's go." So we took a trip to Berlin, had this epic night in Berlin with, Ty and a couple other people we met in Berlin that night. And we wound up in Ty's hotel room late at night, like 4 or 5 in the morning. And he had like a 7 a.m. flight back to New York. And he had a guitar there. And we were all pretty messed up. And I said, "Ty, you mind if I play your guitar?" He's like, "No, it's a loaner. Go ahead." And I played the first kind of verse of a song that I wrote, a parody that I wrote called "Viva la Vida Sucia." It's a Coldplay parody, and it was about getting caught masturbating by my mom. And in the story of the song, my mom slips and falls, hits her head, and dies. So the entire song is about my killing my mom because I was jacking off. And I only had written the first verse, and I finished. And Tyson goes, "Well, where's the rest of the song?" And I was like, I haven't written it. He's like, "Go back and finish that song I want to hear the finished song. It's really funny. So after our European trip, I went back to Miami. I finished the song and sent it to him. And then I went and performed it on stage at the Miami Improv. And I killed it the very first time that I performed it. And that kind of led me to musical comedy becoming my voice. And I started performing songs on stage. And one thing led to another. I had a 3 or 4 song repertoire in comedy clubs in Miami. And then I got involved in a relationship that was a pretty weird relationship. I was in a love triangle with Jay Cutler of the Chicago Bears and a girl, and then Kristen Cavallari, and it was this whole weird thing, and I couldn't handle it mentally, so I wrote a song about it. And I moved to LA to create my first ever YouTube video. And that was the song that I think you saw. It was called Reese's Pieces, which is an autobiographical story of my relationship told through candy metaphors. And it's a pretty dirty song. So for your audience out there, it's still on YouTube. It's called Reese's Pieces. So if you search Reese's Pieces, Steve Berke comedy or whatever it is, you'll find it. And that led to my YouTube career. And 4 videos later, I created a parody of an Eminem and Rihanna song called Love the Way You Lie, where I pretended to be Eminem and I'm rapping all about the legalization of marijuana. And that song was my first really big hit. It went viral. I got a couple million views in a few weeks. And NORML, which is the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, put it on the front page of their website. And I kind of became a marijuana activist overnight. So I was never really a big pot user. Growing up, I never used weed in high school. I didn't really use weed in college. I was actually a very serious tennis player up until the age of 23. I was, a 2-time national champion, a 2-time collegiate All-American, and I was playing on the pro tennis tour when I herniated 2 discs in my lower back, and it sent me down a rabbit hole of doctor's appointments and treatments and injections into my spine, and I had all kinds of pain problems for a couple years. And so my tennis career kind of ended prematurely. I got an opportunity to be on kind of like an apprentice type of reality show, but it was on Fox, and it was with Richard Branson instead of Donald Trump. And I went on this show. I traveled the world with Richard Branson and 16 entrepreneurs. I did quite well on the show. I made it almost to the last episode. And at the very end of the filming of the show, we were all on Richard Branson's private island in the Caribbean. It's called Necker Island. And Richard popped open a bottle of Veuve Clicquot champagne, and he lit up a spliff, and he handed me a spliff in front of 50 people. And you're not going to say no to your entrepreneurial hero when he hands you weed. And so that was my first experience, really, with marijuana. And it was a guy that I idolized, a guy that I really looked up to. And the reason why that was so significant in my life is because it broke the taboo in my head of what a weed smoker could be like. I mean, Richard Branson's a billionaire. He's the coolest man I've ever met in my life. He's like the real life James Bond. He owns 300 companies. He travels around the world in hot air balloons. He's got an amphibious car. He rappels down buildings. I mean, he's a badass, and he smokes weed. And so coming back from that experience and having my back problems, I started experimenting with marijuana as a treatment for my chronic back pain and sciatica. And when it started helping me, I started thinking, something's wrong here. I'm not addicted to this. I don't need it in my life. It's certainly better than the Vicodin and the Valium and the pills I'm being given by doctors. And my parents are doctors. So, they didn't really have a whole lot of education on cannabis themselves. To them, it was illegal and it was a federally controlled drug, and, they don't mess with that. So I became a patient first. And then after I was a patient, that's when I became this, comedian, YouTuber, and my Should Be Legalized music video parody went viral. And then I became an activist. So I went from patient to activist, and then I went from patient to activist to politician. I actually used my YouTube channel and my marijuana advocacy to run a campaign for the mayoralty of Miami Beach, where I'm from. And at the time in 2011, when I ran for mayor of Miami Beach, marijuana was very, very taboo still. There was no candidates that were really openly supporting the legalization or the reform of drug policy laws. And so I ran for mayor of Miami Beach, got crazy amount of press because I was the first ever YouTuber to do so. So I was on the front page of Maxim magazine. I was on the cover of the New York Times. I was in like 300 newspapers and magazines around the world as this crazy comedian who has all these crazy YouTube videos out there trying to decriminalize marijuana in Miami Beach and become the next mayor. And so it's been a crazy journey. I never thought I'd be sitting here in Denver now running the International Church of Cannabis, which we'll get to. But yeah, really, I became a marijuana advocate because of my own personal experience.
I think as you go through your story there and me listening to it, I've never heard it presented that way, like the full story of how you've gotten to this point. And it really represents what I do on this podcast. I like to have on people that have influenced my thinking, but also demonstrate how people have changed their minds. And it sounds like for you to go from where you were with kind of what's fed to us that marijuana is bad and illegal for whatever reasons to the point where you realize, wait a second, it is helping me and it doesn't have the negative consequences of all these other drugs. Your mind totally shifted with that and the Richard Branson thing and other things. And that's what I like to demonstrate every episode is there's things that we all think we have a good understanding on based on what we've learned from whoever has influenced us previously, that maybe some of these things we need to rethink. And so with this topic and with you, I thank you for sharing your story so far here today, but just years ago, putting in my mind that, maybe something should be different on this. And as we continue here, you did all these things nearly a decade ago or within 8 to 10 years ago, whenever that was exactly. But since that time, a lot has changed. I'm not exactly sure how much influence you and what you were doing had on what's happened throughout the country, but I'm sure you've changed some minds along the way. And now more and more states, and you probably know the answer, more and more states have decriminalized it or legalized it. And it's just going to keep moving in that direction.
Yeah, I was like you. I was very anti-marijuana. I actually looked down at people who smoked weed. I was an athlete in my head. I didn't need to get high to enjoy life. I was already high on life. I was very judgmental and opinionated when it came to the weed. I was a child of the 80s. I went through the D.A.R.E program. And when you see a guy who you respect and look up to using weed like it's no big deal and being public about it, like Richard Branson, it led me to think, who else uses weed? Who else out there that I respect and know uses marijuana? And when I made my first marijuana parody, which is called Should Be Legalized, the entire third verse is all the famous people that we all love and respect that use cannabis in their daily lives. And so, it's kind of like, the Hanukkah song where, Adam Sandler is singing about all these people who are Jewish that you didn't know they were Jewish. Mm-hmm. I did this whole third verse on people that smoke weed. And when I looked into it, I found out that, like, hey, if you watch television or if you watch film, every single writer that writes your favorite TV shows and that writes your movies, they all smoke weed. Every one of them. All the famous actors, all the people that are producers, they all smoke. Presidents have smoked. All these people, it's really flabbergasting when you think about, like, Jon Stewart and Stephen Colbert and, Martha Stewart and Oprah Winfrey and, all the Rock, all these people that, I think are popular both on the left and on the right, not just, liberals or Republicans. This is an issue that crosses the spectrum. And I think cannabis reform policy is as popular with Republicans as it is with Democrats right now. I think pretty much the entire country wants to see the policies change. And when you look at the policies that we've had for so long, they've really negatively impacted mostly brown and black people. And so, it's a shame that we've made mistakes in this country, but we're going to continue to make mistakes. What's important is that we correct them. And I went door to door in Miami Beach, and I got over 5,000 signatures to petition to decriminalize marijuana in Miami Beach, presented it to the Miami Beach Commission, and got marijuana decriminalized in Miami Beach. And then Miami-Dade County followed suit. And little by little, you realize that you can actually make a change in your community if you just set your mind to it and go out and knock on doors.
You mentioned a number of celebrity names, and just to counter that just for a moment, how do you learn about these people and their previous or current marijuana habits when you come up with either writing the song or talk about it like with me right now?
I mean, Google's your friend. There's other podcasts that people have done. You know, Joe Rogan famously got Elon Musk to smoke on camera. Musk admitted that he doesn't really like weed. I watched that podcast. He didn't even inhale that, but Musk has admitted that he smoked weed in his past, and it's not for him. Great. Marijuana's not for everybody, but I'll be damned if I'm gonna, tell people that they shouldn't do it because it's dangerous, because it's not. It's not dangerous. It's a medicine, but I don't just believe in medical marijuana. I believe in recreational marijuana. Marijuana, in my opinion, is safer than alcohol. It's safer than tobacco. And God knows we have a country where everybody is smoking and drinking liberally in bars. Like, there's bars next to schools in my neighborhood here. But yet cannabis still is very stigmatized. So, our work is not done. I'm a cannabis activist. I still think reform needs to happen on a federal level. It just happened in Canada, which is fantastic. It's happened in other countries. And, until it's not just legal, but also destigmatized, I think there's a lot of work still left to be done.
How do you describe your cannabis habits at this point in your life? You explained the process up until a few years ago. How regularly do you use it? And I know that you spent a lot of time in Colorado, where that was the first state to legalize it. You can get into the International Church of Cannabis if you'd like. Just how does that all tie together to your present day and what you're up to?
Yeah, I look at, my cannabis consumption is like, I would say, most wine connoisseurs' wine consumption. I don't wake up and pop open bottles of wine and start drinking wine all day. If it's 3 or 4 in the afternoon and I'm at the church and someone's got a joint and they light it up and they hand it to me, I'll take a puff or two. But I don't smoke all day every day. I don't, look down on people who do. Some people that they need cannabis to regulate themselves. That's cool. No judgment there. I would say I smoke, a few puffs, mostly in the evening before I'm ready to unwind, want to watch some TV, watch some Netflix. I'm not an all-day, everyday stoner because I like to be, I like to be sober too, and I also have a job and I have work to do. So, I use cannabis more recreationally than medicinally at this point in my life. Getting to the International Church of Cannabis, that's where I'm sitting right now. I'm actually sitting in the pastor's quarters at the International Church of Cannabis, where I currently reside. And it's been an interesting journey. We started the Church of Cannabis on 4/20 of 2017. So we're a little over 2 years old. We are the first church in the world that allows its congregation to smoke weed in church. We have services like every other church on Sunday, except we don't push any one singular dogma at this church. We welcome members of all different religious backgrounds and faiths. And what we call our religion, because technically we have to file paperwork with the IRS and be a federally recognized religious organization, what we call it here, we call it elevationism. And elevationists believe that an individual's spiritual journey and search for meaning in life can be heightened and deepened with ritual cannabis use. So really the concept is all about elevating yourself to the best version of self possible. And we believe cannabis can help you on your spiritual journey. We don't tell you how much weed to smoke. We don't tell you which God to believe in. We don't believe that there's only one path. We believe there's many paths, and that you should explore your path and experiment with cannabis on your journey however you want to. You can still be an elevationist and a Christian. You can be an elevationist Jew. You can be an elevationist Buddhist. You can be an elevationist atheist. As long as you believe in elevating yourself to the best version of self possible, you're an elevationist. There's no need to convert. There's no grand poobah set.
And what this does, and what I think a lot of churches try to do or claim to do, or really any group in particular, it brings people together for a reason, something that they have in common. So the people that your members and whoever, I guess, shows up there, I'll agree on at least one thing and can share in that together, which is really what we're doing throughout our lives whenever we get together with groups of people, whether it's at a giant football stadium or in a small gathering somewhere else for a little party. We have a reason to come together, and it looks like you're doing that, but within the confines of the legal structure of a church and in an old church building. So explain. I know I've heard and read a little bit about it. What you've gotten some pushback on this, because I'm sure a lot of people don't like what you're doing, even though it seems to be perfectly fine from my perspective.
So, we've created a community here where the common thread that binds the community together is not the singular God that we believe in. It's the fact that we all use cannabis to elevate our lives. And when we opened this church, we kept it a secret for several months because we had the ceiling of the church painted by a world famous artist named Okuda San Miguel, who is a Spanish artist. He's the Picasso of our generation, and it's a Technicolor, Sistine Chapel of marijuana here. And we've become quite a large tourist attraction in the city of Denver because of the artwork and the artists involved with this church. However, when we opened the church, our local community had no idea what we were going to become, had no idea what we were going to be. They were scared, and it was a lot of fear mongering and rumors going around. We were going to throw late night raves, or we were going to be, doing all kinds of crazy parties here, and that's really not what this place is about. We meet once a week like other churches. We do all the things other churches do. We feed the homeless. We volunteer at animal shelters. In fact, we were the only church in this entire neighborhood that participated on Denver Cleanup Day, and we had 40 of our members wearing our church t-shirts, going out and cleaning up trash throughout the entire neighborhood. We have a great community of members. We have over 10,000 members already, and the original pushback was really about 2 years ago. Over the past 2 years, I think we've proven that we're not a nuisance in this community. We're in a very affluent community there in Denver. This is homes in this neighborhood are $1 million plus. And so when a church opens in a kind of a rich white neighborhood, they're a little bit worried of what's this place going to be. And over the past 2 years, we've proven ourselves to be good neighbors and a positive influence on our community. And so we don't really have that same pushback that we do or that we did a couple years ago.
If I or anyone listening or watching right now happened to be in Denver and wanted to stop by, how would stopping by your church be any different than some other church that people might be more familiar with?
Well, first off, it's not free to come into our church because we got to pay our bills. We have a gas and electric bill. It's a couple $1,000s a month. We have to pay staff here. And we've created an entire experience for people to come and view the world-class artwork. And we have a new guided meditation and projection map laser light show that we do at the church every single day. And right now, if you go on Yelp and you search things to do in Denver, the International Church of Cannabis is the #1 thing to do in Denver on Yelp, which we're quite proud of. Red Rocks Amphitheater, #3, the Denver Art Museum, #4, the Denver Zoo, #5, the Botanical Gardens. So we're ranked above a lot of really famous institutions because what we've created here is a really unique experience for tourists to be able to come and have a spiritual kind of show and meditation that is world-class. I mean, you'll see a show like this at Disney World or Universal Studios, but you won't see it anywhere else. So we have this incredible projection map laser light show all over our ceiling. It's $15 to come in and see the show. We do the show every hour. For example, right now we're open. We have people right now in the chapel that are experiencing the show. And the name of the show is called Beyond. So it's a Beyond guided meditation and laser light show. It's really spectacular. If you're in Denver, Google us, check out our hours. We're open every single day, and it's one of those things that you shouldn't miss.
Well, my next trip to Denver will definitely include that, Steve. A couple other topics before I get to the personal growth and being wrong segment with you. I've been getting into the stock market and understanding that a little bit in the last few years. And at some point I realized that you were a part of or behind one of the companies that's listed there, Bang Holdings. Explain what that's all about and what you've learned so far from that process, or maybe what you hope that becomes.
Yeah, so a few years back, about 5 years ago, like I told you guys, I was a pretty famous YouTuber and I had, over 75 million views on my videos. And I got approached to become the chief marketing officer of a publicly traded company. And, the company, I didn't know much about them. They were a vape company. I presented the offer to an acquaintance of mine who warned me about this company, saying that, hey, these guys are shady guys. They're pump and dump fraudsters. If you want to start your own company, I might be able to help you locate some financing or an investor. And so, to make a long story short, I started my own cannabis digital media company, and I raised about $1.1 million of a seed round. And the idea was, let's build as many cannabis consumers as an audience on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, because one day they'll be valuable. One day, when the cannabis industry matures and laws change, people are going to want to be able to reach cannabis consumers. And if we get a head start on this now, at some point the industry will mature and we will have some very valuable assets. And sure enough, last year Canada legalized marijuana recreationally, which allowed Canadian companies to get funding, like billions of dollars in funding, to start pursuing a globalized cannabis business. And so there's several companies that are publicly traded that are worth billions of dollars already. And my company right now, we're a small little company. We have just a few employees. We create content every single day for our Facebook and our Instagram, etc. We create television programming as well. We have a couple shows in development with Netflix and Comedy Central. And we're about to launch our first brand soon. So we're really excited about it. We're a small little cannabis media company, and we're publicly traded on the OTC exchange under the ticker symbol BXNG. And it's been an interesting journey. I never thought I'd be the CEO of a publicly traded company, but here I am, and it's been a wild ride.
Briefly back to your YouTube career. I don't know if you've done much on YouTube lately, but even with that and some of the things that it led to, this is my first effort into something where I'm really putting myself out there. But seeing what you did initially in some of the maybe the racy material that you're putting out there, but it's shocking, and I'm sure it attracted a lot of people that liked it. What was that like for you to put yourself out there publicly in a way like that, where you're gonna have people notice? And is that your true personality, or is that something you've developed around that time?
I think there's a little bit of truth in any character that I play on stage. But is it truth? No. Did I really kill my mom after I got caught masturbating? No, my mom's alive, and I just took her to the airport in Denver, and she's not a big fan of that song, but she understands that it was my job to make people laugh, and I wrote funny songs. And I think if you're going to put yourself out there, the number one advice I can give to you is you can't please all the people all the time. There's going to be people who dislike you. And if you let that bother you, you'll never succeed. When I ran for office and I'd be standing out holding my sign in the street as people are driving by, I get people flicking me off. I get people cursing me out. People didn't like some of my politics. Ultimately, you're not going to make everyone happy. There's no way you can make everyone happy. So it's not a popularity contest in the sense that you're trying to get everyone to like your content. You find your niche, you find the people that your content resonates with, and you cultivate that audience, and that audience will reward you with loyalty. And don't concern yourselves with negative people and people that are trolls on the internet, because if you get involved with that, you'll wind up in this weird rabbit hole downward spiral where you question what you're doing.
And that's something I've had to learn more recently and just kind of get over that fear. And I think I have come a long ways, which is a good transition now to my personal growth segment. I want everyone that I have on my show to share something in particular. And I think you've been doing some of that with the last 10, 15 years of your life and what you've been explaining. But is there something else that you've really focused on maybe lately to grow and become better in whatever way that you find important to you at this point in your life?
I've noticed that genetically, I've inherited a lot of my dad's bad habits. And it's one of those nature versus nurture debates, but I think it's genetics. I really do. And I'm right now in the hospitality industry, right? The Church of Cannabis, as a tourist attraction, I'm providing people with an experience. I have to train my staff to make sure you're friendly to the people. Some people, want to come and see this church, but are really devout Christians and and can't quite wrap their head around the fact that this is a church that's not a Christian church. And how do you put yourself in someone else's shoes and try to understand from their point of view and from their upbringing how something can not agree with them or be offensive to them, etc. And so I've tried to be a more patient and understanding person when it comes to both religion and politics, because I've been involved in both. And those are the two most divisive, those are the things you don't talk about at Thanksgiving dinner. And so, I may not be a huge fan of our current president, but I have friends who are, and they play in my poker game. And let's not get into a fight about Donald Trump at a poker game, right? Like, I get it. I get why you like him, and you should get why I don't like him. And we can still be friends. So really, over the past few years, I've tried to think of how other people feel about the issues that I feel so strongly about, and try to understand how they can feel so strongly in the other direction and not judge them for that.
I think that's important. And you mentioned the topics that you usually don't talk about, the politics and religion. I think it's important to talk about the things in the way that you're approaching it. I think is the way to do it, to understand each other and accept each other for why we might believe or think differently on those topics, but still get along, still realize that, maybe this doesn't matter that much. And we're all going to be different. We're all going to think a little bit differently, but we still can accept other people and maybe learn from them a little bit at a time and all grow together.
I even have friends of mine who can't talk to their own parents because of politics today. It's so divisive. And that's a shame, That's really a shame, because our parents didn't grow up in the same time that we grew up in. I'm very lucky. On the political spectrum, my parents and I are pretty right down the, we're agreeable. But, I feel like there's a lot of hatred out there in the world, and trying to bring people together and trying to be understanding of people's opinions and viewpoints is really important, so that we're all human beings. We're all going to die. We're all going to be buried in the ground. So, let's try to be understanding and forgiving and not hate people for their opinions.
That's definitely one of the messages I want different episodes of this podcast to help get across, because it's so much more fun to get along and learn from people than to be fighting and arguing and hating for no good reason.
Okay.
The being wrong segment, Steve, have you, is there something else that we haven't talked about, or you can get back into something that we have if you want to, but as you look back on your life, something that you've drastically changed your mind about that you feel is important to share, and that you can admit to your former self that you were wrong about it?
Yeah, I think the big one we already touched on is drug policy, right? I used to think all drugs are bad and they should be illegal and they should have really big criminal penalties for them. And now I believe that all drugs should be legal, all of them, even heroin, everything should all be legal, because criminalizing a health issue doesn't make sense. If someone's got a heroin addiction, they don't want to be addicted to heroin. They're physically addicted to heroin. That's a healthcare issue. That's something that, if you look at the statistics in countries where, like Portugal, for example, guess what? If you're addicted to heroin in Portugal, the government will give you free heroin. You can go into a heroin clinic and they will literally shoot you up with heroin and help you with your addiction. Why do they do that? Well, there's proven science that if you start lowering the dosage and helping these people, they're not breaking into cars and committing crimes to get money to go and get heroin. They can walk into, and they're ashamed that they're addicted. No one's proud that they're addicted to heroin. They're ashamed. They walk into the clinic in Portugal, they say, I have a problem, and the Portuguese healthcare system tries to help them wean themselves off of heroin. And the statistics are showing over the past 10 years, it's working. These people are becoming cured. This is a healthcare issue, not a criminal issue. And it's less money on their government as far as the hospitals, as far as crime and policing. So, and I'm of the opinion now that, we should not be criminalizing addiction, because most people who are addicted to drugs are not addicted to drugs by choice. They got addicted because of one reason or the other. Really, you look at a lot of drug manufacturers today, the reason why we have an opioid problem is because it's a very profitable industry. These drug companies, which one of them just got fined billions of dollars, they're creating heroin in pills. It's absolutely, my parents are doctors, like, that's a heroin pill. That's the same thing that you shoot in your veins.
and they're giving it to people after they have surgeries, and these people are getting addicted to these opioid pills, and we have a real epidemic in this country. And I don't think these people should be thrown in jail. I think these people should be given help. So I think I was wrong about how I viewed people who do drugs. And over the past few years, my stance on drug policy has evolved not just to legalizing cannabis, but to decriminalizing, not legalizing. I don't think we should have places where you can buy cocaine on the street corner, right? But decriminalizing it and helping people so that they can move on with their lives and not throwing them in jail where they can no longer get a job afterwards because they have a criminal record. And what do they do after they get out of jail? They find other criminal behavior to make money to feed their addiction.
I think that's a perfect example of, for pretty much all of us in some area of our life, we stay or have stayed in hiding because whether it's something we're doing isn't legal or something we're ashamed to talk about, that we don't get the help that we need at times because of some kind of structure that we've grown up in. And people just need help sometimes. And I think we all have and all do. And also with the way that the media in this country is so prominent with just what's happening in this country and not around the world. I think there's so many good ideas in place, in practice in other countries that would help this country in so many ways if we just started to adopt them. But that's not the way we operate right now. And I really struggle with that as we try to improve on our terrible systems with more bad ideas instead of using the good ideas that do exist already.
Yeah, unfortunately, after I ran for office, I learned how the political sausage is made, and our system is broken, right? There's so much corruption on a federal level in Congress. The whole concept of having to get reelected and raise money from all these special interest groups just to be able to get reelected, that whole system is broken. Democracy is the best system out there. It's certainly better than socialism. It's certainly better than communism. But there are flaws with democracy. And I know this country is built on freedom of speech and the First Amendment. I don't believe that campaign donations is free speech. I don't think that we should have unlimited campaign donations from drug companies to politicians. I don't think we should have unlimited campaign donations from private prison lobbyists to politicians. There's no reason we should be profiting off people to put them in jail. So there's a lot of parts of our political system that's broken, unfortunately. And that's a whole nother conversation and a whole nother show. But, I do have faith that this country is going to right the ship and we're going to figure it out.
Thank you, Steve. And before we wrap this up, if there's anyone that wants to follow you or reach you, what's the best way for that? And anything else that you want to add?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube. Just search my name. It's Steve Berke, Berke, no U's. And if you want to follow the Church of Cannabis, that's also easy. It's just at Church of Cannabis on Facebook and on Instagram. Same thing, just at Church of Cannabis on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find us, Google us. We're out there. We'd love to have you guys following us. And, thanks so much for having me on the show.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for joining me.
All right.
Thanks for checking out People I Know Show. Links are in the show notes for the People I Know Show Facebook and Instagram and YouTube accounts. All the ways to find People I Know Show online, in addition to listening to the podcast on whichever app that you choose to listen on. There's also a link to that. Plus, you'll find ways to see some of Steve Berke's work and what else he's been up to and ways to reach him through the internet if you liked what you heard today. And as you always can do, send an email to me, Curt Carstensen, using the email address peopleiknowshow@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in.